Men of Reddit, what is the creepiest thing a woman has ever said to you? Back in college, I was at a study group and found myself talking to this girl. Just talking about class and eventually just talking about random other stuff like life at school and favorite places to eat nearby. Then, after a moment of silence, she tells me that she wants to see me fight off a group of guys trying to attack her, and she'd hold me while I was beaten up and bleeding on the floor. I mean, just randomly dropping that on someone when a minute ago we were talking about best places to get cheap food, it's a bit much. Edit. For the dozens of people asking, I just kind of brushed it off and awkwardly tried to turn the conversation to something not about me getting violently beat up. Also, I'd maybe talked to her a handful of times and always in class, and this was the first out of classroom conversation I'd had with her. I worked at a fast food place years ago. My girlfriend came in for a milkshake and was waiting at the end of the counter with one of the regulars. Doris, the regular, was near 90 years old and had invited me to her home to have a pot roast at her house multiple times. I was being a pain and put about a foot of whipped cream over the top of the lid of my girlfriend's milkshake and brought it to her. Doris looked at her and then looked at me deadpan and said, "I wish you'd cream me like that." Doris never ordered desserts. Was on a nearly empty plane sitting in the last row in a window seat. No one else in the row. I eventually fell asleep. Woke up with a tatted up goth looking chick sitting next to me, eyes boring a hole through my head, just straight up staring, unblinkingly at me. I look at her and I'm like, hi? She stares for like 5 more long seconds and then exhales. "Sorry, you look like an angel sleeping with the sun on your face," she said breathlessly. We chatted for maybe another 30 seconds or so. She apologized for staring like that a couple more times, and she went back to her seat. Shit was surreal, though. A complete and total stranger walked over to me and said, "I need you to rearrange my guts with your cock." She pointed at the men's bathroom and then walked over and into it. While I left, this woman had 20 years at least on everyone in that place, and the best way for me to describe how she looked is to say, half-crushed beer can. When I was younger, I worked in a bar popular with 18 to 20-year-olds. One night, as a group of girls were leaving, I made eye contact with one of them. That was enough. She came stumbling up to the bar and said, "I have to show you the background on my phone." She put her phone on the bar, and the background was a picture of me. "I took it about 3 weeks ago. I'm totally obsessed. Your photo is the last thing I see before I go to sleep, and the first thing I see when I wake up." A few years ago, I started hanging out with this girl who was around my friend group at the time, and came to trivia nights with us occasionally. Things were going well at first, but then I started noticing some odd grins. She never slept. She would do bizarre things like start her shower, then go start cooking food, then sit down and begin tending her plants as if she kept forgetting what task she was doing. She put a sign out on her lawn with a cell phone number on it wanting to connect with strangers. It got weirder as it went on. I mentioned to her once that I liked thunderstorms, and she became convinced that I could cause thunderstorms. At first I thought she was joking, but it started to weird me out. Then one night, I was having a sleepover. I noticed that she was just sitting in bed, watching me. She put her hand on my heart and whispered that she could hear the beautiful fishes in my blood. That very morning, her father burst into her apartment yelling about her appointment with the psychiatrist that she kept avoiding. She told me that her parents and the doctors were trying to convince her that she had bipolar disorder and wanted to shut her brain off. Long story short, her friends and family convinced her to go. She bravely took on her mental illness and got help before the manic episodes got out of control. And now we are very close friends to this day. I was once on this dating site, OkCupid, and I started talking to a girl, and one of the first things I said to her was, "What are you looking for on this site?" And her response was something along the lines of, "Honestly, I'm looking for a sweet young man to take out for a night of drinking, take him back to my apartment, lure him into the bed, tie him up, suffocate him until he stops struggling, strip him of his flesh, then donate his skeleton for science. How about you?" Yikes! She had an actual human skull on her desk, too, and worked with corpses as a forensic anthropologist. I recently spent the weekend with a woman. We've hooked up periodically for the last 25 years. Anyways, we were chatting, and she brought up how a guy she dated insisted he come to a doctor's appointment with her. The doctor informed her that she has herpes, and the guy was disturbed by this. She was complaining about this to me hours after we had sex. She was bitching to a guy who just slept with her that another guy was disturbed by her being diagnosed with herpes. So far, I've had no blisters, but it's the last time I will hook up with her. So, a few years back, I was working as a bouncer for a Halloween event at this club. Fast forward to 3 a.m., and it's closing time. I'm showing everybody to the door. One particular drunk woman stumbles out and comes out to me saying, "Where's the out? I need to find the out." I reply, "Well, if you follow the hallway to the courtyard, the parking lot is just past it." "No, you need to show me." So I think, fine, whatever, get everyone out. So I show her to the exit. She grabs onto my arm for stabilization because she's super wasted. As we're walking, she looks at me and goes, "Hey, you're kind of cute. Do you think I'm cute?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Narrator, she wasn't. I get her to the, and I emphasize this, very empty and open, well-lit parking lot and ask her if she has a ride coming to get her. She replies, "Yeah, I do, but you gotta wait here, 'cause I don't want to get, our word, out here. Unless it's by you," as she gives me a wink. Fucking nope! I backed away to a safe distance real quick. Luckily, her ride showed up with a minute, and I was like, "Cool, she's your problem now," and went back into the building. I bartended at a small dive bar years ago. It was late one night, and I had a lone female guest. She was probably middle-aged, polite, and short while ordering her drink. I thought nothing strange or got no red flags, so I continued my closing duty, sweeping around the tables, in particular, not behind the bar. I'm focused on cleaning and getting out of there. And I turn around to dump dustpan, and she's standing right behind me, staring me dead in the eye. "Will you dance with me?" she asks in a slow, nervous manner. For the record, there is no music playing, and we're the only two living creatures in this building. I tell her politely that I'm closing and cannot right now, and quickly put distance and walk behind the bar. In the 5 seconds I have to walk through the kitchen, this guest has walked back to her stool and begun hysterically crying at the top of her lungs. She asks me if I think she's ugly, fat, unattractive, a whore, and several more derogatory things, which I deny and deflect. She screams and tells me she hates me and runs out of the bar. I ring the beer she drank half of up as a waste and lock the door. I continued to work there for 7 more years and never saw this guest again. Slightly off topic, but this experience comes to mind reading this. This weekend at Veld, a musical festival in Toronto, I was actually aggressively approached. A girl had grabbed my arm as my friend and I were walking by. As I tried to pull away, she looked me dead in the eye and said nothing. I said, "Sorry, I'm in a hurry to the bathroom, can't talk." She then proceeded to touch my stomach and tried to get a handful of my package. Throughout all of this, she said nothing. Scared the shit out of me. A woman I wasn't dating, I was already married, and even if I weren't, I wouldn't be interested, and I were in a college library, working separately on editing a journal. We were the only people in the room. She said something like, "This work kind of sucks, right?" I responded with something like, "It's frustrating." Out of nowhere, she then says, "I can scratch my nails down your back to relieve the frustration," in a tone that clearly was sexually aggressive. Shocked, I just said, no. Fortunately, she took the very obvious hint and didn't push things further, but I made a point of not being alone in a room with her ever again. I just wanted to see if you'd stay. Now, the reason this was fucking crazy is because preceding that, I got a text from her saying she maybe missed a period. I said something like, "Oh, okay, so what if you're pregnant?" She volunteered an abortion. Cool, good shit. I don't have to worry about raising a kid at 16. Keep in mind, we weren't even sure yet that she was pregnant. So then suddenly, she texts me saying maybe she changed her mind and she would want to keep it if she were pregnant. So I reasonably asked, what changed? She says she might just want to keep the kid if she's pregnant, and I keep sort of driving after it. Okay, but what's different between now and an hour ago or 2 hours ago when you brought up an abortion? She accuses me of pressuring her, calls me an asshole, and stops responding to my texts. A day or two later, she tells me she wasn't even ever pregnant in the first place. And, see the quote above, that's why she said she went through all that shit. And I guess her not knowing the kind of person I am made that okay for her to do. God, I wish it had ended there. She always wore a pretty sun hat. I've never even seen her take it off, unless she was sleeping. I didn't mind because she looked beautiful in it. My friends warned me she wasn't all there in the head, but that was fine with me because everyone has their struggles. It was the first time we would be sexual together, and she said, the hat stays on during sex. This was a little weird to me, but it didn't change my experience, so I was okay with it. A week or so later, she was napping and she left the hat on the floor. I wanted to be nice and put it back at her desk where she usually keeps it while sleeping. When I found out that there was a camera in the hat, I then realized she had footage of absolutely everything we have done together. I broke up with her immediately. I felt so violated that she could record all we have done together without my consent. Afterwards, it took around 2 years for me to date again. But recently, I looked at her Facebook account and found a link leading to personal images of me and other men I know. I contacted those men right away and we filed a lawsuit and pressed charges against her. Sorry that was such a book. When I was 17, I worked at a school running a summer camp program with a teacher. The teacher was a married woman with 2 kids in her late 20s. At some point, she asked me if I had ever seen a breast, and when I said no, told me to come find her on my 18th birthday. I can't remember the details, but she also offered sexual favors if we both went on an employee camping trip. At the time, I thought it was flattering, but now that I'm older, I realize how fucked up that is to say to a minor as my boss. If I see you in 10 years with a different woman and you're married, I will kill her and you in your sleep. That was after I dumped my ex. That is definitely in the top 10 of creepiest things I've been told. Then there's others like, do you think if I saved your cum in my freezer, I could have your child when I felt ready? That was by someone I dated for a little over 2 months. Then there was the one who told me, I would honestly don't mind if you fucked my friends, but I would cut your cock off if you fell for one of them. I've met my share of crazy. So, not so much that was said, but more of what happened. I had been dating this girl in my late teens, early 20s, and off and on for about 5 years. We were on our last run, and she'd done so many cringeworthy things over the last stretch, it was time to leave. Now, over the course of 5 years, I received many gifts and housewarming gifts, etc. from her and her family. I tell her we're breaking it off for good, and she immediately starts going off, cheating on me, never loved me, blah, blah, blah. She leaves. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail, this was the late 90s, that had an inventoried list of things that she and her family gave me over the years, including a $300 bill for plane tickets to Los Angeles, where we went to visit her dad 4 years earlier. She really wanted me to go, so she bought the tics. The list had about 20 to 30 things on it, down to the trash can I had in my room and the curtains as well. I laughed it off and went about my business. I come home from work about 2 days later to find things missing from my room. The curtains were the most noticeable. A note on my desk confirms that she had come in and took most of the things on her list, and that I still owe her $300. And it gets worse. I call her and tell her if she returns my things, I won't call the cops. She begins screaming through the phone at me, saying those were her things. I hang up on her and call the cops. They ask if I want to press charges, and I say no, unless she continues to contact me. The only thing that sucked to lose was my favorite hoodie. The rest was just clothes and home products. I was more upset she broke in while I wasn't home. 2 or 3 days later, I get another letter in the mail. This time, there are 2 letters. One addressed to the dean of social work at the college she attended, and the other 2 to me. The letter to the dean was insisting that if he heard anything about her in the news, I was the crazy one, and to basically overlook whatever was said about her. Her letter to me in her infinite wisdom, was explaining that I had made her write this letter to the dean by accusing her of breaking and entering and theft and calling the cops. Easily the most insane thing a woman has ever said or did to me. There are many stories about this woman, but this is easily the worst. I was a bartender for about a decade. One night, two couples come in. The girls sit on one end of the bar, the boys at the other. The boys sat at one end of the bar to watch sports, and there wasn't 4 seats together. While they drank, the boys had a conversation about how their wives were low libido and they weren't getting any. The wives had a 30-minute long conversation about which waiters and waitresses they'd like to sleep with, and down to the detail of what they would do to them. About 10 minutes later, they called me over and told me exactly what they would like to do to me. One of them wrote their number on a napkin right before they got their table. Every time I hear a married woman say she has low libido, I think back to that night. Does she have low libido, or is she telling her friends all the nasty things she would do to other men or women while they are just a few feet away? I was a cashier at my college's market, and this very clearly drunk girl and her friends come in, and we're buying NA drinks. She goes, "Oh, hi, my name." I had my name tag on, so I didn't think about it. But after scanning her stuff, she frowns and says, "Don't you remember me?" I had no clue who she was, and I shake my head apologizing, and she goes, "Well, I know you." She's staring at me, and her friends are looking uncomfortable. I laugh awkwardly, and she goes, "You live in my dorm hall and dorm number, and aren't you roommates with my roommate's name?" After that, my eyebrows raised, and her friends kinda pushed her out, saying things like, "He clearly doesn't remember you," and all that. Later that night, I asked my roommates and gave a physical description, and both of them had no idea who she was. Drunk. I think she was drunk, at least, because she never acted like this before. Customer that was old enough to be my mom, I was a 21-year-old cashier at the time, kept hitting on me one day. It was a regular customer I had helped tons of times with nothing like this happening before. She started just saying, "Can I tell you something? I think you're so attractive." If it ended there, I would have been flattered, as it's not often I get a compliment like that, and I'd have gone about my day. But then she started talking about how she, really has a crush on me. Then started getting into, "Oh my God, you're younger than my son. This is so bad, but I think you're so hot." Of course, this is when my register froze up, so I literally had to bring her to another lane, all while her remarks were getting more and more forward. She was mostly repeating the same things, but was winking, and I swear she was caressing her chest at one moment. Thank the gods, though, we were really busy in my store that day. She tried staying around after I checked her out to keep on telling me how into me she was and how naughty she felt about me. But because I had so many customers, I was able to ignore her until she went away. I haven't seen her since. Not a man, but I remember a former friend of mine in first year who had really bad stalking tendencies. Slept with this guy, I'll call him Dave, she picked up in the bar and got really obsessed with him. They hooked up and even dated for a while, but she scared him off. When I was in her bathroom one afternoon when I was visiting her, about 2 months after they had broken up and he basically ghosted her, I found a pile of nail clippings and some hair on her bathroom sink. I yelled out, "Want me to chuck these for you?" And she burst into the bathroom while I was still in there. Seriously, what the fuck? And yelled, "Don't throw them out. They're Dave's." She got all agitated after that and was trying to convince me to use my thermographic camera, which I had for legitimate non-stalking research purposes and belonged to the university, to night stalk Dave and make sure he wasn't with some other girl because, get this, she'd sent him over 100 texts that day and needed to make sure he wasn't cheating on her. We kind of grew apart after that. Oh man, I hope this doesn't get buried. I used to work as the door guy at a hole-in-the-wall bar in college. It was such a simple job, all I did was read books and look at IDs. Well, one slow night, I'm sitting at the bar talking to this 26 to 30-year-old lady. I was 20 or 22 at the time. She is wasted. Well, she starts hitting on me hard. I'm not into it at all, and I'm completely sober. She leans over and is like, "I need to go to the bathroom." I tell her, "You're a big girl. I think you can manage it." She puts on a sexy, pouty face and says, "Yeah, but I wanted you to wipe me." A girl who was always known for her kindness and pureness in our class one day sat down next to me and started showing dead bodies of people who committed suicide by jumping out of windows of flats with the most genuine smile on her face I've ever seen. She knew that I wouldn't freak out of trenched human bodies because of my career path that I wanted to choose back then, but still, that smile and the total randomness of this whole thing did make me wonder what must have this girl went through. I haven't talked about that to anyone, not even to her, because the very next day she turned back into the same, always kind and outgoing person. I was in a relationship that was nearing its end. One day, my girlfriend was both intoxicated and very upset with me. I didn't intend to, but I had embarrassed her earlier in the evening. As she was yelling at me, she said, "I don't think you get how this works. I could call the police right now, make something up, and you'd be sitting in a jail cell tonight." Later on, a friend was consoling me, and he said, "When people tell you who they are, you have to believe them." It still creeps me out thinking about it. Said? It was what she did. Third date, I go to her place to pick her up. All the lights are out, and maybe 100 candles are lit in the living room, creating oppressive heat. It was the middle of summer and in the midst of a heat wave. I go in, she's been crying, and she proceeds to tell me she loves me and shows me her arm. My name has been cut into it in 2-inch letters. I noped the fark out of there.